James Anderson's eyelids fluttered open to the soft hum of the Horizon's life support systems. The cold, sterile light of the cryo chamber cast stark shadows on his features as he sat up, confusion etched across his face. The digital clock on the wall blinked an unexpected date. It couldn't be right. Computer, his voice was raspy and used for too long. Report status. The ship's AI, a calm androgynous voice, responded promptly. Welcome back, Mr. Anderson. Current ship time is 5:23 a.m. Ship date is March 3rd, 2457. You have been awakened due to a system malfunction. Malfunction? James swung his legs off the bed, feeling a chill as his feet touched the cold metal floor. Detail. There was a critical failure in the cryogenic suspension system's coolant network. Your pod was the only one affected. Repairs are underway, but manual oversight is required. James processed the information. 85 years early. He was alone. Walking over to the terminal, he pulled up the ship's schematics and crew manifest. There had to be someone who could help, someone else who might be woken without risking their life. The list scrolled past, but one name caught his eye: Dr. Eli Wallace, a systems engineer. If anyone could fix this with minimal risk, it was Eli. Without a second thought, James headed to Eli's cryopod. The corridors were silent. The only sound is footsteps and the distant hum of the engines. Reaching the pod, he hesitated, his hand hovering over the manual override. Waking someone early was against every protocol. But he needed a fellow engineer, and more than that, a companion to maintain his sanity. Taking a deep breath, he pressed the button. The pod hissed open, and Eli emerged coughing and spluttering, just as disoriented. James waited for the initial shock to wear off before speaking. Eli, I'm James Anderson. I had to wake you. There's been a malfunction. I couldn't handle it alone. Eli rubbed his face, blinking rapidly. How bad is it? Bad enough to wake you 85 years early. I'm sorry, but I need your expertise. Eli stood, steadying himself against the pod. Show me. Together, they walked back to the control room, James filling in the details. The screens blinked to life as Eli's experienced eyes scanned the data. We need to stabilize the coolant levels first, Eli suggested, hands flying over the controls. Then we can patch up the network. It's going to take a couple of days. A couple of days? James echoed, worry lacing his tone. We got time, James. More than we want. Eli replied, a wry smile touching his lips. Working side by side, the task felt less daunting. Eli's expertise and calm demeanor helped ground James, who had felt adrift in the shock of his premature awakening. As they worked, they talked about their lives before the journey. Eli's passion for vintage Earth motorcycles, James' last memories of the bustling streets of New London. It wasn't the camaraderie of years, but it was a start, a bond formed by shared circumstance and the necessity of cooperation. By the end of their first day together, they had managed to stabilize the system temporarily. Exhausted but unable to shake the adrenaline of the day, they shared a meal in the mess hall. So, what do we do now? Eli asked, his voice low. We fix the ship. Then, we figure out how to cope with all this, James replied, gesturing around them. Eli nodded, thoughtful. At least we're not alone in it. No, James agreed, feeling a flicker of something like relief. We're not alone. As they headed back to the control room to plan their next steps, James felt a newfound determination stirring within him. With Eli by his side, perhaps the next 85 years wouldn't be as bleak as he had feared. James and Eli spent the next few days deep in the guts of the Horizon. Their efforts focused on repairing the critical systems affected by the malfunction. The silence of the ship was punctuated only by the clink of tools and the soft hum of the engine. As they worked, James couldn't shake the heaviness of the loneliness that pressed on his chest. He watched Eli, who seemed more adapted to the isolation, moving with a purpose that James envied. Hey, Eli, James started during a break, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. How are you handling this so well? Eli shrugged, handing James a water bottle. Guess I've always been comfortable in my own head. But it's not easy, James. Don't think I'm not struggling too. James nodded, taking a long sip of water. The truth was, he felt overwhelmed by the idea of spending decades isolated on this ship. He needed more human contact, something to anchor him. An idea had been growing in his mind, dangerous and desperate. He decided to broach it. Eli, what if we woke someone else? Just one more person. For support. Eli set his water down, his expression turning serious. James, that's a huge risk. Waking someone up without consent. I know, it's against every regulation. But think about it. We're engineers, not doctors or psychologists. What if something happens to one of us? Eli ran a hand through his hair, considering the implications. After a long pause, he spoke. It's your call, James. You're the captain here. But we pick someone who can actually contribute, not just any random passenger. James felt a spark of hope. There's a botanist, Alara Bennett. She could help us grow food, make life here sustainable if this trip is longer than we thought. And she might help balance the dynamics here, Eli added, slowly warming to the idea. All right, let's look into her file. They moved to the ship's database, pulling up Alara's records. Her credentials were impressive. PhD in botanical sciences, several years of field experience on Earth and Mars. She's more than qualified, James noted, feeling a mixture of excitement and guilt. She can make a real difference. That's settled then, Eli said with a resigned sigh. Let's prepare her pod. We'll need to explain everything once she's awake. Why she's here, what happened. Preparing the pod took the remainder of the day. That night, neither man could sleep, each lost in their own thoughts about the decision they had made. The next morning, they stood by Alara's pod, the same unsettling procedure ahead of them. James reached for the manual override, his hand trembling slightly. Ready? Eli asked, his voice steady. James nodded, swallowed hard, and activated the release. The pod hissed open, and they waited for Alara to wake. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion mirroring James's own experience days earlier. As she sat up, James stepped forward. Dr. Bennett, I'm James Anderson, and this is Eli Wallace. We're sorry to wake you, but there was a malfunction. We need your help. Alara looked between the two men, her brow furrowing as she processed her new reality. How long have I been asleep? And what kind of help do you need? James and Eli exchanged a glance. It was time to explain everything. The malfunction, their repairs, and the new life they were all going to have to build together on the horizon. As they talked, Alara listened intently, her initial shock giving way to a cautious acceptance. By the end of their conversation, she was asking detailed questions about their food supplies and the ship's agricultural capabilities. Looks like we're going to be all right, Eli whispered to James as they watched Alara pulling up agricultural schematics on a tablet. Yeah, James replied, a weight lifting from his shoulders. Together, we'll make it work. The decision to wake Alara had been fraught with ethical and moral concerns. But as the three of them started planning their survival strategy, James felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was their crew now, and together they would face whatever came next. In the wake of Alara's unexpected awakening, the atmosphere aboard the Horizon shifted palpably. With 3 crew members now awake and active, the previously overwhelming silence of the ship was replaced by the soft murmur of voices and the occasional laughter echoing through the hallways. Alara, having had a night to process her new reality, approached James and Eli in the ship's common area, her expression composed yet tinged with undeniable curiosity. James, Eli, I've been thinking about our situation, she started, her voice steady. I understand why you woke me, and while it's not ideal, I'm here now. I want to make the best of it. What's our first step towards sustainability? James, relieved by her pragmatic approach, exchanged a quick glance with Eli before responding. First, we need a reliable food source. We were hoping you could help expand the hydroponics bay. Eli chimed in, pulling up a digital layout of the ship on a nearby screen. We have some basic setups here, but they're not enough to support us indefinitely. We're engineers, not botanists. Alara nodded, stepping closer to the display. Let's start by assessing what you have. Then we can scale up and diversify the crop production. If we manage our resources well, we could set up a sustainable system. The 3 of them spent the morning in the hydroponics bay, examining the existing facilities. Alara took the lead, her expertise evident as she discussed potential crop rotations and nutrient cycles. As they worked, the conversation flowed more freely. Alara asked about the ship and their mission, and in turn, James and Eli shared anecdotes from their training and the early days of the journey. "So, you've both been keeping this ship running all by yourselves?" Alara asked, a note of admiration in her voice. "Just trying to keep busy," James replied with a half-smile. "It helps to have a focus, something to work towards." Eli laughed. "Yeah, and now we have you to keep our plants alive and kick us into shape." The mood lightened, and as they shared a meal later, the initial awkwardness gave way to a burgeoning camaraderie. "All right, tomorrow I'll start optimizing the water recycling system," Eli declared, looking between James and Alara. "Water efficiency will be critical if we're going to expand the hydroponics." James nodded, "And I'll check on the solar arrays. With the extra load from the bay expansion, we need to make sure we're capturing as much energy as possible." Alara, feeling more like part of the team, added, "And I'll begin the seed germination tests. We need to know what will grow best under these artificial conditions." As they set their tasks for the next day, the ship felt less like a prison of metal and more like a shared home. Each of them had a clear role to play, and the purpose that came with these roles filled them with a cautious optimism. Over the next few weeks, their routines solidified. James handled the ship's mechanics, Eli took charge of the technical systems, and Alara transformed the hydroponics bay into a burgeoning garden. One evening, as they gathered in the common area, James brought out a small bottle of wine he had been saving for a special occasion. "To us," he said, raising his glass, "to finding strength in each other, and to building a future together, no matter how unexpected." Alara and Eli raised their glasses in response, the warm light of the room glinting off the glass. "To us," they echoed, and for a moment, the weight of their isolation seemed to lift. They were no longer just survivors, but pioneers, forging a new path together on the distant horizon. The relentless pace of daily life aboard the horizon had created a rhythm that felt almost normal. Under Alara's guidance, the hydroponics bay flourished, transforming into a verdant oasis that provided not only sustenance, but also a psychological lift for the crew. James and Eli, meanwhile, tackled the mechanical and technical upkeep of the ship, ensuring that their floating home remained functional and safe. One morning, as James inspected the solar array outputs, Eli joined him with a digital tablet in hand, displaying the latest energy consumption data. "Looks like the arrays are performing well, but we're still pulling a lot from the reserves at night," Eli commented, adjusting the settings on his tablet. James nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon through the viewport. "We might need to think about rationing power at night, or maybe even expanding the array. We have the panels in storage, right?" "Yeah, we do. It's just a matter of installing them. But that's a two-person job," Eli replied. "I'll help you with that," James said, clapping Eli on the shoulder. "What about after that? Should we start thinking about other projects?" Eli chuckled. "Always thinking ahead, aren't you?" "Well, there's always the AI upgrade project. I've been putting it off because it's not critical, but it could help improve efficiency around here. Let's add it to the list then." "Between that and the solar panels, we've got our hands full," James concluded with a grin. The two set to work on the solar panels the following day, the task requiring both precision and patience as they maneuvered the bulky panels into place outside the ship. Meanwhile, Alara was busy in the hydroponics bay, carefully pruning and tending to the plants. Later, as the trio gathered in the common area for dinner, Alara shared her progress. "The new crop rotation is working out better than expected. We should have a steady supply of fresh produce now." "That's great news," James responded enthusiastically. "Fresh food makes a huge difference." Eli nodded in agreement, then turned the conversation toward their next big project. "So, about the AI upgrade, James and I were thinking of starting that next week. It should make the environmental controls more responsive and maybe even give us a better interface for the hydroponics data." Alara looked intrigued. "Could it help with monitoring nutrient levels and growth rates?" "Exactly," Eli said. "It could automate much of the routine monitoring, free you up for more of the experimental stuff you mentioned." "I'd appreciate that. It's been manual checks up till now, which is fine, but automation could really streamline things, Alara admitted, her eyes lighting up at the prospect. The conversation shifted to plans and possibilities. With each new project, the crew found themselves more invested in their life aboard the Horizon, each task bringing them closer and embedding them deeper into the fabric of their shared existence. James raised his glass, a new tradition that had formed among them, to teamwork and making the most out of every what and every water drop we have. To teamwork, Alara and Eli echoed, their glasses clinking together in the soft light of the common area. As they finished their meal and began cleaning up, the sense of camaraderie was palpable. They were no longer merely shipmates. They were a unit, a makeshift family, bound together by circumstance, necessity, and now choice. Later that night, James paused at the viewport, looking out at the stars. The vastness of space could be overwhelming, but as he turned back to see Eli and Alara laughing over a game of cards, he felt a profound sense of contentment. This was their life now, and together they were building something enduring, one day at a time. As the weeks turned into months, the crew of the Horizon had settled into a comfortable routine, finding solace in the predictability of their daily tasks. The ship, once a mere vessel meant to carry them across the stars, had transformed into a vibrant hub of activity and growth. One lazy afternoon in the common area, while James was sketching out plans for a new water filtration system, Eli approached him with an old guitar in hand, its surface dulled by time but still intact. "Found this in one of the storage units," Eli said, plucking at the strings, which gave off a slightly out-of-tune twang. "Thought I might try to learn how to play it." James looked up from his sketches, intrigued. "That's a great idea. It's been ages since we had any music around here. I didn't take you for the musical type, though." Eli grinned, sitting down across from James. "Never had the time before. But now? Might as well add musician to my repertoire." James chuckled. "Add it to the list, then. I might join you making a band. What about you, Alara? Any hidden talents you'd like to explore?" Alara, who had been quietly reading nearby, looked up and smiled. "Well, I've always been interested in painting. There are some art supplies in the recreation module. Maybe it's time I gave it a try." "Sounds like we're all set to broaden our horizons," James said with a laugh. "Tomorrow, we start. Music and art, the soul of our little society." The next day, true to their word, the common area of the Horizon transformed into a creative workshop. Eli struggled with the basics of guitar playing, his fingers fumbling over the strings. Meanwhile, Alara set up her painting supplies, choosing a corner with the best light. James watched them both, feeling a warmth spread through him. It was good to see his crewmates embracing new challenges. Inspired, he pulled out a small electronic keyboard from a storage bin and began to tinker with it, trying to remember piano lessons from his childhood. As the sounds of Eli's guitar and James's keyboard mingled awkwardly but earnestly, Alara painted quietly, her brush strokes confident and fluid. She occasionally stepped back to examine her work, a colorful depiction of the view from the Horizon's viewport. Eli paused his strumming and looked over at Alara's canvas. "Hey, that's really coming along. It looks just like the nebula we passed last week." Alara put down her brush and wiped her hands on a cloth. "Thanks, Eli. It's nice to work with colors again, not just green from the plants." James stopped playing and walked over to admire the painting. "You've got a real talent, Alara. It's beautiful." The afternoon drifted by with the crew lost in their new hobbies, the ship filled with the sounds of music and the scent of paint. They shared a light-hearted energy, each person supporting the other's attempts, no matter how novice. As the day wound down, Eli put his guitar aside, rubbing his sore fingers. "Well, I'm no musician yet, but it's a start." James smiled, closing the keyboard. "It's about the process, not just the outcome. We're making this place more than just a ship. It's becoming a home." Alara nodded in agreement, cleaning her brushes. "And we're more than just crewmates or survivors. We're creators, learners, friends." They gathered their things, each feeling a sense of accomplishment and connection. The Horizon wasn't just carrying them across the galaxy. It was evolving with them, a canvas for their growth and creativity. That night, as they shared dinner, the conversation was lively, filled with plans for their next creative session and ideas for other projects they could tackle. The ship felt alive, its corridors echoing with the new sounds of their making, a testament to their life and work together in the vast expanse of space. In the shared isolation of space, the bonds among the Horizon's crew had deepened, evolving into a complex tapestry of friendship and mutual respect. Each day brought new challenges, but also laughter, shared discoveries, and increasingly subtle glances exchanged under the artificial lights of the ship. One evening, after a particularly grueling day recalibrating the navigation sensors, James and Eli found themselves in the common area with Alara, who was putting the finishing touches on another of her paintings. "That looks incredible, Alara," James commented, his eyes lingering not just on the painting, but on Alara herself, admiring the way her concentration softened into a smile as she turned to face him. "Thanks, James," she replied, her cheeks coloring slightly. "I'm trying to capture the essence of the Andromeda Nebula. Remember how it looked when we passed it last week?" "I do," Eli chimed in, joining them with 3 steaming cups of coffee. "It was spectacular, but not as spectacular as that painting." The trio settled into an easy silence, sipping their coffee and enjoying the quiet camaraderie. James, however, felt a stirring within him that had been growing for some time, a warmth that extended beyond simple friendship. "So, Alara, what got you into botany?" James asked, eager to shift his racing thoughts and learn more about her. Alara set her cup down, her gaze drifting toward the greenery of the hydroponics bay visible from where they sat. "I always loved how plants could make any place feel like home. No matter where I was in the universe, if I could grow something, I felt anchored." "That's a beautiful way to put it," James said, his voice tinged with admiration. He noticed her hands still stained with paint and felt an inexplicable urge to hold them. Eli, sensing a subtle shift in the atmosphere, excused himself. "I'll leave you two to it. I think I heard the AI system hiccuping again. Might need a look." After Eli left, an awkward but electric silence fell between James and Alara. "James," Alara began, hesitantly breaking the silence. "I've noticed, we've been spending a lot of time together, and I feel like there's something more." James met her gaze, his heart racing. "Yes, I feel it too, Alara. I didn't want to overstep, especially given everything, but yes, I feel more." Alara reached out, her hand brushing against James's. "It's strange, isn't it? Out here in the middle of nowhere to find this. It's the most unexpected place to find something so profound," James agreed, entwining his fingers with hers. The contact sent a jolt of warmth through him. "Would it be okay if I—" James hesitated, leaning closer. Alara nodded, closing the gap and meeting his lips with a gentle kiss that held all the promise of new beginnings. The kiss was soft, exploratory, and filled with the pent-up longing of months spent in close quarters. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless, their foreheads resting against each other. "We should take this slow," Alara whispered, her breath mingling with James's. "Absolutely," James replied, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "There's no need to rush. We have all the time we need." They spent the rest of the evening talking quietly, planning how they might explore their relationship in a way that respected both their professional roles and personal emotions. It was uncharted territory, but they agreed to navigate it together, step by careful step. As they said goodnight, James felt a sense of contentment he hadn't known he'd been missing. The ship around them hummed softly, a familiar backdrop to the new, delicate tune of their growing affection. Several weeks had passed since James and Alara had first acknowledged their feelings for each other. The Horizon had never felt more like home, with every corridor and common area infused with the new warmth of their burgeoning relationship. One evening, in the tranquility of the hydroponics bay, James found Alara tending to the vibrant array of plants under the soft glow of the artificial lights. He approached her quietly, watching as she expertly pruned a stubborn vine. "Working late?" James asked, his voice low, not wanting to startle her. Alara turned, her face lighting up at the sight of him. "Just trying to get this new vine to cooperate." It seems to have a mind of its own, she said with a laugh. James stepped closer, his hands finding hers, gently pulling her away from her task. Maybe it needs a little more space to grow. Much like us? Alara smiled, placing her tools down. Maybe you're right. Speaking of which, I've been thinking. James raised an eyebrow. Oh, about us, she continued, her voice soft but sure. How natural this has felt, despite the unusual circumstances. I'm really happy, James. James's heart swelled at her words. He pulled her into a gentle embrace, feeling the perfect fit of her body against his. I'm happy too, Alara. Happier than I thought possible out here. They shared a tender kiss, their previous hesitations giving way to a deeper confidence in their feelings. As they parted, James brushed a stray hair from Alara's face, his touch lingering. Alara, I know we've been cautious, taking things slowly, but I don't want to hold back anymore. Not with how I feel about you, James confessed, his gaze locked with hers. Alara reached up to touch his cheek, her expression earnest. I don't want to hold back either. I trust you, James. I trust us. With a mutual understanding, they moved closer, their kisses growing more passionate. James's hands explored the small of Alara's back, drawing her closer, while Alara's fingers tangled in his hair, each touch sparking a cascade of warmth and desire. They made their way to James's quarters, their movements unhurried, but filled with an electric anticipation. Inside, the soft lighting and the privacy of the room offered a new intimacy. As they stood facing each other, James spoke softly. I want to be with you fully. If you're ready. Alara nodded, her hands steady as they reached for his. I am. I've never been more sure of anything. Their lovemaking was a slow exploration, each kiss and touch a discovery. They moved together with a rhythm that was both new and deeply familiar, a celebration of their connection that was emotional as much as it was physical. Later, lying together under the soft covers, their bodies entwined, Alara rested her head on James's chest. This feels right, she murmured, her voice filled with contentment. It does, James agreed, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. It's like we've found what we didn't even know we were missing. They spoke of the future, of dreams and plans, their words weaving a tapestry of hope and shared ambitions. Their relationship had become the heart of their existence on the horizon, a vital force that enriched every aspect of their lives. As they eventually drifted off to sleep, the ship continued its silent voyage through the stars, its course steady and sure. Inside, two souls were adrift in the peaceful joy of newfound love, their hearts anchored securely to each other. As the final weeks of their journey approached, the mood aboard the Horizon shifted from one of routine to anticipation. The destination, a colony on the remote planet of New Terra, was now just a speck on the horizon, growing clearer with each passing day. James and Alara stood together in the observation deck, gazing out at the approaching planet. It was a beautiful sight, with swirls of blue and green and white clouds streaking across its surface. Hard to believe we're almost there, James said, his arm around Alara's shoulders. It is, Alara agreed, leaning into him. When we started, I couldn't imagine reaching this day. Especially not like this with you. James smiled, kissing her forehead. I know what you mean. It's been quite the journey. But I think the real adventure is just about to begin. Their conversation was interrupted by Eli, who entered the observation deck with a tablet in hand. Hey, you two, you might want to take a look at this. We're getting our final briefing from the colony. The three of them gathered around the tablet, where a message from New Terra's administration outlined the landing procedures and initial integration plans for the new arrivals. As long as they don't ask us to stop growing our own food, I'm good, Alara joked, eliciting a chuckle from James. Eli nodded in agreement. They'll probably be glad to have someone with your skills, Alara. And with James's engineering expertise and my tech know-how, we'll be more than just passengers starting over. Speaking of starting over, James started, turning to face Alara and Eli. There's something, Alara, and I wanted to share with you. Alara squeezed James's hand, smiling at Eli. We've decided to make our partnership official once we land. A commitment, not just to each other, but to our new life on New Terra. Eli's face broke into a wide grin. That's fantastic news. Congratulations. Looks like New Terra will be a new beginning in more ways than one. As they discussed their plans and hopes for the future, the conversation turned to the contributions they hoped to make to the colony. I've been thinking, James said thoughtfully. We have a chance to help shape how this colony develops. Maybe we can ensure it doesn't just survive, but thrives ecologically, socially. Alara nodded. I'd love to see our work with hydroponics become a model for sustainable living here. And who knows? Maybe our story can inspire others. And I can set up the tech infrastructure, Eli added. Make sure it's all running smoothly and sustainably. Between the three of us, we could make a real impact. Their discussion was full of optimism and determination. They were no longer the unwitting victims of a malfunction, but active participants in their destiny, ready to contribute their skills and experiences to a new world. As the horizon began its final approach, the trio prepared for landing, their emotions a mix of excitement and nervousness. They were about to step onto a new planet, to start anew, not just physically, but in their lives and relationships. Landing procedures went smoothly, and as they disembarked, they were greeted by members of the colony, eager to welcome the new arrivals. James, Alara, and Eli stood together, united and ready for whatever lay ahead. Looking around at the bustling colony, James felt a profound sense of accomplishment and anticipation. Here we go, he murmured to Alara, taking her hand. Here we go, she echoed, her eyes bright with excitement and love. Together, they stepped forward into their new life, the uncertainty of their long journey giving way to the promise of a new beginning. Their story, born of a malfunction and a bold decision, was just the first chapter of what they hoped would be a long and fulfilling narrative on New Terra.